Hey, ghoul friends. It's me, Adrian, or Ayden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of ooky spooky scary stories. Thank you so much for coming back, if you're coming back. If you're a first timer, welcome, bienvenidos. Glad to have you, glad to see you here. And you're still early on, so if you want, you can pause this, go back and listen to the first few episodes of the show. If not, you can just keep on listening. It's your life. I'm not going to tell you how to live it. That's completely up to you. Also, it's Pride Month, y'all. Happy Pride. I know this is the last week of June, but hey, it's never too late, and Pride Month is every month, all right? As a proud, queer, gay, homosexual man myself, I'm always proud. 365, all right? And you should be too. So to all my LGBTQ plus family, I love you all. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep doing this. If you're an ally, if you're not part of the community, keep fighting alongside us. Thanks for being there. But this is our month, okay? It's also Cancer season. My boyfriend's birthday is literally today as I'm recording this, and my birthday is on July 10th. So you know what you can do for my birthday? You know what I want for my birthday? I want you to go ahead and follow Susto Podcast on Instagram. And I want you to leave a 5-star review with a scary story that you want me to read on the show on Apple Podcasts. And if you don't have Apple Podcasts, I want you to send an email to sustopodcast@gmail.com with your story, and I will read it on the show. That's what I want for my birthday. So go ahead and shower me with gifts like that. I also like cash, but we can take care of that later. Anyway, welcome back to another show. So glad you're here. This is going to be kind of a different episode, which I keep saying that. I'm always like, this is going to be different. This is new. But this is only the 7th episode. So it's like, what really can I do new? This is all still new. I don't know when it's going to be old. I don't know when it's not going to be new. Hopefully it feels new all the time, but I don't know. I just wanted to share that with you. I don't know why I keep saying that, because this is still new. But anyway, today's episode is going to be a little bit more on the educational side. I realize that I've never explained what Susto is for people that don't know. So I know that I have some non-Spanish speakers listening, or some people that aren't a part of the community. So make sure that you listen today, and I will fill you in on what it means. And if you do know what Susto is, still listen in. Maybe I found something online that wasn't right, or that was explained wrong, and you can give me some feedback on that, and I'll share that feedback on the next episode too. So I hope you'll enjoy this. Before that, I also wanted to announce some really quick things that I'm like super excited about. I feel like they're like milestones for something like this. So number one, I got my first fan art, which is super, super, super cool. I was in HEB when I got the notification on Instagram, and it's fan art by, I want to say their Instagram is Oi Mutt. But if you go to the Susto Instagram, I shared it on there and I tagged the artist on it. It is so awesome. I was so giddy when I saw it. It's a drawing based on last episode 6. And in this piece of art, there's also a quote from the last episodes. It's completely based on that, which is like, it just blew my mind. I thought that was so cool. I'm still super excited about it. So thank you so much for doing that piece of artwork. You all make sure to go to the Susto Instagram, share some love in it, like it, and go to the artist's page too. I think they posted it on their page as well. So make sure that you go and like it on there also, and show them some love for that, because that was really, really, really awesome. Also, for the first time, I guess I got an early birthday gift, because someone left a 5-star review with their story in the review, like I'm always desperately asking people to do. So that's really cool. I'm going to go ahead and start off the episode by reading that, and then we'll jump into the educational stuff. If you don't like learning and you get bored of it, I'm really sorry, but you should still give it a chance, because it's some really, really cool stuff that I found online, and I'm really excited to share it with you. So here we go. Okay, so this person, they left their 5-star review, and the name that's on here says Cage Rinku, Cage with a K, all one word. Thanks for sending this in. They said, I've been enjoying this podcast so much. These are all stories of folklore that most of us are already familiar with, but it's awesome to have an RGV point of view. Keep it up. Thank you so much, Cage. I really appreciate it. And I think I've been doing a good job. So thanks for the validation, the affirmation, the support. I love it. And so here is Cage's story. They said, I have had several weird situations happen, not only in my apartment where I'm currently living, but also at my parents' house. This is one that happened in 2010. I was living in Alamo with my parents, brother, and grandmother at the time. For those of you that aren't from the Rio Grande Valley, Alamo is a city here in the area. A regular day for us was my brother and I would go to school, my parents would work, we would all meet at home at 5:30 to 6 p.m., and my grandma would stay at home alone until we returned. This day was going according to schedule. I got off my bus and walked home at the same time my brother pulled up in his car, and my parents pulled up as well. As we walk into my house, my grandma was hysterical, screaming in Spanish, Ay, Ofelia, desde que te fuiste a la mañana, esta vieja no me deja en paz. Ya le dije que se largara, pero no se va. Ofelia is my mom's name. Also, for non-Spanish speakers, that's saying, oh, Ophelia, since you left this morning, this old woman won't leave me in peace. I already told her to go away, but she won't. In front of my grandma was where she would normally sit on a huge, heavy wooden rocking chair that was normally on the other side of the living room. But my grandma was sitting in one of the sofas. So I'm visualizing it that normally his grandma or their grandma sits on the rocking chair, but when they got to the house, grandma was sitting on the sofa, and directly in front of grandma was this old rocking chair that normally is on the other side of the living room. I'm not sure if I made that more confusing, but I hope you all understand it. Either way. They continue. My mom tried to calm her down, and finally my grandma was able to tell us what happened. According to her, as soon as my mom left in the morning, a woman dressed in black with a bunch of dogs with her walked out of my room and stood right in front of her and said nothing but offered my grandma her hand, as if to say, come with me. My grandma cursed the woman and asked her to leave as she started praying, but the lady wouldn't budge. Eventually, my grandma tried to walk away from her and sat on the sofa, but the lady simply dragged the wooden rocking chair and sat in front of my grandma for hours until we walked in. Ooh, that's creepy. Okay, let me finish this before I go off. So it says, my mom calmed her down and set her to bed after some tea, and she called the whole thing just a figment of my grandmother's imagination since she was home all day bored. This would have been a fine explanation, but my grandma passed away just 3 months later from respiratory complications. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Really been enjoying the stories. Keep them coming. Cage, thank you so much for sending this in. I'm really sorry about your grandma. But also, so when I read this the first time and reading it again, so obviously I think that this woman in black with dogs was a representation of death, of la muerte. And growing up, I'm not sure if anybody else heard this, but growing up, one of my friend's older brothers told me one time when I was spending that at their house, because we heard dogs barking in the middle of the night because we were kids, we were staying up late, and we heard dogs barking. And my friend's brother, and this stuck with me because I was so creeped out. He was like, you know what that means, right? When dogs bark at nothing in the middle of the night. And we were like, what? Like, we didn't know what it meant. And he was like, that means that death is passing by looking for someone. And so seeing this now, reading this now, it makes me think that like, oh, like maybe there is some truth to that. So I'm going to look into that for y'all, maybe for another episode, but it was really cool to see it in this story. Again, Cage, thank you so much for sending this in. I really appreciate it. And I couldn't ask for a more perfect example of a listener submission, a listener story. So again, if you all want me to read your stories on the show, this is how to do it. 5-star review with your story in the review. Or if you don't have Apple Podcasts, you can go ahead and send it in to the Gmail account at sustopodcast@gmail.com. So I realized that I actually never explained what Susto is. I know that I've been explaining for like non-Spanish speakers or people that aren't from the area that I've been telling these stories about, that I've been explaining things, but I haven't explained the name of the podcast, right? So obviously Susto, it's a Spanish word, and it directly translates on Google here. If you look it up on Google, it says that it's a translation of the word scare, fright, or terror. But beyond that, Susto is this phenomenon or like this experience in the Mexican American culture. And I'm saying specifically Mexican American because I'm Mexican American. I grew up with Susto being explained this way, but I know that it also kind of branches out into other Latinx cultures. And so I looked up some stuff online and I found these two really, really cool websites, or these two really cool pieces about what Susto is. And I wanted to share that with you all to give you a better understanding of what Susto means, like the word itself, and why I chose that name for the podcast. And through reading these two pieces, I'm going to get into some really interesting stuff. So just a really quick trigger warning for like PTSD, mental illness, or mental wellness issues. I'm going to be talking about that. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So the first one that I found was on a website called newstaco.com. And I think this is a website based out of San Antonio, because one of their links up here says San Anto Southside. And this article, I'm going to call it, was put together by someone called Mary Mata on June 7th, 2013. So Mary Mata, thank you so much for putting this together. This is really cool to read through. So it's kind of like a compilation of a bunch of like different studies and different, testaments to Susto. And this page or this piece is called The Science Behind Susto. And I thought this was a really interesting way to look at the phenomenon of Susto in a scientific way, because it's definitely like a cultural, spiritual kind of phenomenon. So again, I'll just get into it. So Susto, and I'm going to be reading from the website. So Susto is a Latino folk illness based on the popular belief an individual can lose their soul through a frightening experience, resulting in many mental and physical symptoms. This folk illness is not found among other cultures and is more of a belief rather than a malfunction of the brain. According to Mind Hacks, susto literally means fright in Spanish, but the folk illness associated with the term is much more complex than just subsequent shock or anxiety after a scare has occurred. Susto is a Latin American folk illness attributed to having an extremely frightening experience, often including soul loss as part of the syndrome. That was a quote from Monica Williams, PhD, a licensed clinical psychologist and associate director of the Center for Mental Health Disparities at the University of Louisville. And this is something that she told Saludify, which I think is another website or another organization. The quote continues, "People afflicted with Susto may have symptoms which include nervousness, loss of appetite, insomnia, listlessness, despondency, involuntary muscle tics, and diarrhea." Williams explains the symptoms of Susto are actually quite similar to post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, which includes anxiety, avoidance, jumpiness, sleep disturbances, and depression. Another quote here says, "When referring to soul loss within Susto, a closer meaning to this may actually be loss of vital force, as the soul is typically not thought to have actually left the body until death," she explained. This could resemble the fatigue and anhedonia, which may be a part of depressive symptoms within PTSD. Really quick, anhedonia is described as the inability to feel pressure. I just had to look that up. Therefore, the concept of Susto as a cultural bound syndrome may be better conceptualized as a culture-specific description of PTSD itself, which is really interesting to think about, that it's this form of PTSD that is specific for the culture. I know I just reworded what I just read right there, but sometimes I just need to do that to like break it down for myself. Another part of this piece, it's like subtitled Susto, PTSD, and Mental Disorders. Williams is not the only expert to compare the symptoms of Latino folk illness, Susto, with PTSD. Dr. Pam Gracie, a clinical psychologist in Dallas, Texas, and an author, told Saludify PTSD is just one of many conditions which may contribute or resemble Susto, though it is not correct to say one is the result of the other. Assuming a traumatic event triggered the symptoms, Susto might resemble modern-day PTSD, which includes disassociation in reaction to a traumatic event, said Gracie. However, it is also important to remember that someone can appear as though their soul has left their body for numerous diagnostic reasons. I just realized I've been saying this person's last name wrong. It's Garci, not Gracie. So it continues. Garci explains it would be important and expected to rule out medical causes for the someone feeling as if they had lost their soul, and the person would benefit from a good physical. So essentially, it's always good to cross-reference, right? So cross-reference with an actual doctor or a licensed physician to, just make sure that there aren't other causes or like roots of the issue for what's happening. Because Susto is a Latino folk illness, it is a cultural belief, and its symptoms may actually be manifestation of many actual mental or physical conditions that need to be looked into, preferably by a culturally competent physician, which I really like that. I really, really like that, culturally competent physician, because for someone that hasn't heard that term before, is just someone that takes into consideration their patient's background or like how they were brought up or what they believe, and would use that or just be mindful of that while they're treating or assessing their patient. So just a really quick backstory, and maybe this is a story for another day, but I was diagnosed with HIV in 2014. And before I went to the hospital, we went to the curandera that lived on the other side of the alley from my house. And so that's how, like, I guess entrenched is the word that I want to say, but that's how, like, I guess faithful people are to their beliefs, that I was not doing well at all. And one of our initial reactions was, yeah, we had also gone to the doctor, but we also made sure to go to the curandera nearby and ask for her help and her guidance. And then after that wasn't working, then I ended up in the ER. But just to give that sort of, I guess, example of what that might mean for some people. Anyway, this piece continues. For example, she states, there might be a medication that induces this state or a medical condition such as a brain tumor. Secondarily, it would be important for the person to get a really good psychological workup, including the ruling out of the following suspects: psychotic disorders, substance abuse disorders, severe depression, psychogenic fugues or amnesia, post-concussive syndrome, disorders on the autism spectrum. If this were an enduring pattern versus a sudden onset, they're specifying for the autism spectrum ones, personality disorder, and malingering, especially if there is a secondary gain issue. I'm not exactly sure what all of those mean. I'm just kind of sharing the message with you all, okay? And I will be sharing the links for these websites so that if you all want to, you can look into these too, because these are really, really interesting. I know it took me like to read these things like twice over before I fully understood a lot of the concepts in here. So again, I'll be sharing those for you. Another piece on this website is traditional treatment for folk illness, Susto. As a Latino folk illness, Susto has been treated by ritual ceremony for decades. According to Rice University, Susto, which can affect anyone but is seen primarily among Latinas, is traditionally treated through oral natural remedies, such as teas of orange blossom, Brazil wood, or even weed. Occasionally, figs boiled in vinegar are also administered. The most effective treatment from a cultural standpoint, however, is that of a varida, or a sweeping ritual. So I think we mentioned this when Joe was on here, what a varida is or what a limpia is. This treatment should be done immediately after the traumatic event occurs and is optimally conducted by a curandera, or another healer, or a shaman in his or her home, or their home. During the ritual, the individual afflicted with Susto must recount the terrifying experience while lying on the axis of a crucifix on the floor. Fresh herbs such as basil, purple sage, rosemary, or rue and egg are then swept over the afflicted's body while the curandero says a series of prayers attempting to return the frightened soul to the body. If the first session is not effective, the process is repeated every third day until the patient is healed. And the last piece of this website is conventional treatments for Susto. While Latinx people are traditionally less likely than other groups to seek mental health treatments, should they visit a medical professional for treatment of Susto, treatment would likely consist of psychological counseling as well as medication to combat feelings of depression or other medical symptoms. A potential cultural barrier exists, however, for conventional treatment of Susto. Because it is a Latinx folk illness and its root found deep in the Hispanic culture, again, I'm quoting this, a patient may not believe they can be cured by modern methods and therefore are not only less likely to seek modern therapies, but less likely to believe they can be cured. Okay, and this does specify here at the bottom that this article was first published in Saludify, so you can also check it out on there too. Again, I thought this was a really interesting approach to breaking down what Susto is, because it's a scientific look at it. And I really appreciated that they spoke a lot about traditional treatment, PTSD, other mental disorders, and conventional treatments for Susto. And it's mentioned in this next website some of the other treatments that people go to for Susto, but I thought it was really important because, as it said at the end of this piece, is that there is a cultural barrier, and that a lot of the time communities of color, especially communities of color that are very faith-based, don't often seek out therapy or like going to a doctor's office as their first option. And that's totally fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with faith as therapy, with faith or religion as like meditation. A lot of people use that as their therapy, as their meditation, and that's totally fine. But what I'm thinking is that someone like me, for example, that was raised Catholic, that was raised to believe as faith as treatment for whatever was going on in my head, that it didn't work for me. But that was the only thing that I was fed for such a long time. And like, that's no shade to my family or my parents. Like, that's just what worked for them. And they thought that it would work for me too, but it didn't. And I didn't know that I had these other options for a very long time. So I think it's really important for us to put this message out there to everyone in general. But again, specifically people of color that are raised with a faith background, that's not your only option. And while it might work for you 100%, that's fine. It might not work for the next person at all, or only a little bit. And I think even a combination of like whatever your faith is or your religion and other methods of treatment that can be used together, can be used in conjunction. And I think that when we're able to kind of break down these lines between you should only be seeking help this one specific way, then we'll all get a lot of the help that we need. I'm a big believer in therapy. I love therapy. I haven't seen my therapist in a while because I don't have insurance right now. So I'm waiting to get my insurance back so that I can go visit her, because she was great. And I think everybody would benefit from therapy. Like, even if you think that you don't have problems, if you have the opportunity, if you have the means to go see and talk to a therapist, I think you should still do it, because it's not going to do you any harm whatsoever. And I think a lot of us think we don't need therapy. And then once we get there, we're like, oh shit, I really needed this and I didn't even know it. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I wanted to get this message out there that I think it's really important that we acknowledge mental illness as people in general, but again, specifically in communities of color. It's not something that we get to talk about very often. And if we do, we're always met with like resistance or like doubt or like even shock sometimes, where people like, I've heard stories of like people telling their family that they started therapy and their family's like, oh, well, this is the crazy one, or like, we all knew it, and like kind of shitting on people for getting that help. And I don't think it should be seen that way. I think it should be encouraged. And I think it should be given a chance, I guess, is all I'm trying to say in a long way. But thanks for sticking with me through this one. So I have another page here that I found when I was looking for stuff. And this is actually like an academic study, which I thought was really, really cool. And it's called Susto and Mal de Ojo Among Florida Farm Workers, Emic and Etic Perspectives. So Emic and Etic, from what I found online, are just like, they're like ways of studying something. It's like they're academic terms. But anyway, the authors of this one are Roberta D. Bayer and Marta Bustillo. And this was published by Blackwell Publishing on behalf of the American Anthropological Association. So I thought it was really cool to see Susto in like a full on academic study that was put together by what sounds like two Latinx women based on their names. I don't want to make any wrong assumptions, but that's what it sounds like to me. And I'm just going to say I found a lot of pieces that were put together written by white people, and like, thanks for doing the work, but a lot of you know what I mean. So I was looking through this, and it's like a 12-page paper. A lot of it seems pretty easy to understand. So I wanted to share with you some things from here, maybe like 2 or 3 pages. So I jumped into the background here. And again, this study was for Susto and Mal de Ojo, which is like the evil eye. But obviously we're just focusing on Susto right now. So the background that they have for Susto is this. Data on Susto, or fright sickness, comes from studies along the U.S.-Mexican border, as well as in rural communities in the state of Oaxaca. While this illness varies slightly from community to community, in general, the cause of Susto is believed to be a startling occurrence that may cause the departure of the soul from the body. There is also a social dimension to Susto. Social situations that cause an individual to feel fear or anger may also cause Susto. Among the symptoms reported in Hidalgo County, Texas, which is really cool to read that because that's the county I live in, so yay, I guess it'll shout out for us. But anyway, along the symptoms reported in Hidalgo County, Texas, were loss of appetite and weight, listlessness, and a lack of motivation to carry on normal daily activities. In studies in the early 1980s in the U.S. Southwest, Susto was being treated by 42.8% of the population studied, usually at home or with the aid of a curandero or curandera. The curandera usually performed a magical purification ritual designed to restore the psychological and spiritual balance that the frightening event had disturbed. So just to give you a heads up before I continue, it's going to get pretty heavy in a while with like statistics. So I'm sorry about that if that bores some people, but I found it really interesting to see it broken down like that. So I hope that you do too. So this Continues, recent studies suggest that apart from its psychological component, Susto may also be linked to higher rates of morbidity and mortality. Epidemiological studies were carried out in the state of Oaxaca, Mexico, among 3 populations, Mestizos, Zapotec Indians, and Chinantec Indians. Each population was divided into 2 groups, one consisting of people with Susto and another, matched for age, gender, and place of residence, consisting of people who were ill but not with Susto. Those with Susto were not only more ill than the controls at the beginning of the study, but they also had higher levels of parasitic infection and lower hemoglobin, hematocrit, medical terms I don't know, levels. Patients suffering from Susto had more life-threatening illnesses, and 7 years after data collection began, they were more likely to be dead. A strictly psychiatric interpretation of Susto was not found. Those with Susto did not score any higher than the people in the control group on tests of psychiatric impairment. The study was, however, unable to link a diagnosis of Susto with any discrete illness recognized by biomedical healers, although Susto does label a person whose chance of dying is significantly greater than that of a person who is not identified as having Susto. So then I jumped to the results portion of the paper. And again, they had to divide it between Susto and Mal de Ojo. So for Susto, it reads, mean age of the children in the first time they had suffered from Susto was 1 year, 1 year old, and 71% of the children never had Susto again. The symptoms generally persisted for a short period of time, although 26% reported that the illness lasted for a month or more. Susto affects both males and females. 43% of the cases were girls and 57% boys. Symptoms mothers reported included diarrhea, fever, vomiting, and waking in the night, or any combination of those. Other symptoms were crying or lack of appetite or loss of weight. The most common cause given for Susto was that the child had been frightened, although 7% felt that a child could develop Susto if its mother had been frightened while she was pregnant. 88% of the cases of Susto were treated, most commonly by the child's mother, a señora or a curandera, and in only 1 of the 48 cases did all or part of the treatment include care by a physician. So again, only 1 out of those 48 cases that they studied did someone take the kid to a doctor. 2 of the mothers commented that physician treatments did not cure Susto. The most common treatment was to pass herbs such as hierbabuena or estafiate over the child's body. So again, like barida or limpia. They say to do this 3 times while saying prayers. Sometimes an alum stone was burned and the child was held over the smoke as a cleansing. Others suggested an alternative treatment of putting scissors in the shape of a cross under the child's pillow. Mothers' recommendations for severe cases of Susto in which the initial treatment did not work were to take the child to a curandera, 37% of them said that, or to a physician. Again, that was 37% of people that said that. Other suggestions included herbs, teas, sugar and water, and taking the child to a priest to be blessed. Sugar in the water, that one jumped out to me for sure, because I still remember when as a kid, anytime something scared me, my mom's reaction was like, she got a glass full of water, threw in like 2 spoonfuls of sugar and just mixed it up and told me that I needed to drink it quickly. None of the stuff I found online was specific to that treatment. So I don't know like what the meaning or what the science is behind that. I think it might have something to do with like blood pressure, but that's just one thing that I remember. Like I remember being in a car crash when I was younger. And when we got home and told my mom, she was like, immediately she went, she got the water, she put the sugar in it. And she was like, you need to drink this. So when I saw that, that was really cool. Like it brought it back home for me. This continues. The mothers felt that treatment was necessary because they believed that if untreated, Susto would lead to the child's death. 60% of the mothers believed that, or at best, the child would remain ill. Even so, the mothers were still not necessarily inclined to seek biomedical attention for their children. 25% would take the child to a physician, while an equal number would try a curandera or an herbalist. Physicians thought that 60% of the children who the mothers had diagnosed as having Susto should have been seen by healthcare personnel. They also indicated that 20% of the cases could be life-threatening if the symptoms were not treated. The physicians found it difficult to suggest diagnoses. For the majority of the children the mothers had diagnosed as having Susto, and based on the information given, were not able to do so for any of the cases. Hospitalization was not suggested in any of the cases. So everything else on this paper is pretty much like that. It's broken down to a lot of statistics. It's very scientific still, but I felt like this one had more perspectives of people from the culture in it. And so I thought it was really interesting when I found this. I thought it was cool that this phenomenon was broken down that way. So again, for those of you that didn't know what Susto was, what it meant, that's what it is. And I chose the name mainly because of the literal translation. That was like the reason that I chose it, because like fear and fright and being scared. But beyond that, this like phenomenon, this experience, it's more than just a word. It's like a whole experience. And while I don't want to give anyone Susto like that, I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling, like in the pit of our stomach, like just that fear literally just bubbling up inside of you. And so I thought, when I was developing the concept for the podcast, I thought of that word and I was like, oh, that's perfect, because it's like, it's more than just a word. It's more than just a word that has a meaning. It's this whole big cultural thing. And so if you didn't know what Susto was before, I hope that I was able to clarify, what that meant. And if you did know what Susto was and you're hearing this, I hope that this made sense to you and this also fell in line with what you were taught when you were younger. I know that a lot of it didn't make sense with what I was told when I was younger, and I never really thought of the connection between Susto and like trauma and PTSD. So that was really cool to see that connection, and it makes a lot of things make sense for me. So thank you all so much for listening to this very educational episode. I had been meaning to do this for a while, and I'd feel like this maybe should have been like episode 1 or like, I don't know, but I think it worked out the right way, that I got to share some stories with you all. We got to share these moments, and now that gives you a better idea of what this all means. As always, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this one. And again, for any and all updates on the show, please follow the Instagram at Susto Podcast. Again, if you have stories that you want me to share on the show, like I did for today, again, thank you so much, Cage, for sending that in. You can do that by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and leaving your story in the review. If you don't have Apple Podcasts, you can send an email to sustopodcast@gmail.com and I will read it on the show. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I'll talk to you next time. Bye. This is a Net Thought Podcast.